الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa ta'ala wa barakatuh. On behalf of Alum Islamic Center, I would like to welcome all of you to this very special event titled God's Existence, delivered by Brother Hamza Tzortsis, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Brother Noor, young Brother Noor, to come to the stage and inshallah recite some verses from the Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يره أحد. ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة.
سبحان الله.
ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة. أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يره أحد ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة فك رقبة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مكربة أو مسكينا ذا متربة ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة أولئك أصحاب الميمنة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة عليهم نار مؤصدة صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah, that was really very, very beautiful. To begin with that lecture for tonight, inshallah, can I kindly ask brothers to switch off their mobile phones? It is for the etiquette of listening to a talk. If you switch your phones off or put them on silent at least. Brothers to come forward from the back as well, just in case there's any other brothers that come, so there's enough space. Health and safety, in case of a fire, hopefully there won't be a fire, but for brothers the exit is to my left, and for sisters it's the sisters entrance to the front of the masjid, inshallah. Before I introduce Brother Hamza to come to the stage, I would like to thank Brother Hamza on behalf of the masjid who's taken his time out from his very busy schedule to come to the masjid and travel from a far distance to come and enlighten us with his talk today, inshallah. Just a very brief biography of Brother Hamza. He did insist that I just invite him to the stage, but I'll present his biography to you. Ustad Hamza Andreas Tzortsis is a convert or revert to Islam. He's an international public speaker on Islam, a writer, lecturer, and intellectual activist. He's particularly interested in Islam, politics, Western and Islamic philosophy. Brother Hamza has debated prominent academics and intellectuals and delivers presentations across the world on various topics ranging from does God exist, why Islam, the miracle of the Quran, Islam or atheism, to can we live better lives without religion. The Ustad also regularly appears in the media explaining and demystifying Islam and providing unique perspectives on current affairs. He has appeared on the BBC, Press TV, Islam Channel, Ummah TV, Iqra TV, TV3 Malaysia and National Public Radio of America. His personal interests include reading, writing, teaching Wing Chun, Kung Fu, boxing, gardening and spending quality time with his family and poetry as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask Brother Hamza to come to the stage and deliver his speech, inshallah.
It's the hair, you see. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. To proceed, my beloved brothers and sisters, respected elders, respected ulama, I grant you the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
What can you say after listening to that Quran?
Subhan.
Very moving. When you listen to Quran like this, for me personally, it's as if I really yearned to be born in a Muslim family. So my dad could tell me, memorize Quran. Because we know, brothers and sisters, the Quran is the light of Allah Jalla wa Ala. It's His book, it's His eternal word. We know the Quran is His miracle. We know the Quran is not only His miracle, and it's a beautiful assonance, it's a beautiful sound, it's a beautiful recitation, but we know it is that light that enlightens the road, the pathway, the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the pathway to Allah Jalla wa Ala, where we are able to seek His pleasure, but also seek His face. And we are all eligible to enter Al-Jannah because we have given this rahmah, this mercy, this guidance called the Quran. And this was very important to feel moved by the Quran, of course, but also to be people of Quran. Because it's very important to be people of Quran, because if we're not people of Quran, then what kind of people are we? Allah Jalla wa Ala has given us amazing guidance for every single one of us to read and to reflect. Not only to recite, but also to internalize, to ensure that the Quran doesn't stay at our throats. The Quran is not outside of ourselves, rather it's inside ourselves, meaning we are the Quran. If you remember the hadith concerning the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when it described the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam as a walking Quran, because he was a manifestation, he enacted the Quran, he enacted its wisdoms, its guidance, its thought, its ideas, its concepts, its values, its love. Because wallahi, when us as Muslims we recite the Quran, we are reciting the words of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And not only this, when we recite them and we ponder upon them and we memorize them, they're in our hearts. And wallahi, no one could take this away from you. Whether you know the whole Quran, a few chapters or a few verses, no one can take this away from you. It is your Jannah. It is your Jannah. And no matter where you go, your Jannah is going to be with you. As one of the famous scholars, Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, he said, if you don't have Jannah in this world, you may probably not have Jannah in the hereafter. And this Jannah is the dhikr of Allah Jalla wa Ala. It's the remembrance of Allah, it's the Quran, it's the closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you may be thinking, why is Hamza talking about the Quran? We're talking about God's existence. But this is the point. Because if we take the Quran seriously, we know it's not just a book of do's and don'ts. How many times does Allah Jalla wa Ala say halal and haram?
Loads of times.
Very few times. Very few times do you find in the Quran halal and haram. Very few times. But to give you a challenge, where does it say in the Quran you must fast? No, Surah Baqarah doesn't say this. It doesn't say it at all in the Quran. Listen to what the Quran says concerning fasting. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ لَلَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Listen to the words. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, O you who believe. Allah Jalla wa Ala is already elevating you, saying you are just a rearrangement of carbons. You're just a few molecules put together. You're a speck of dust in this almost infinite universe. And Allah Jalla wa Ala has raised your status by calling you the people or the person of trust, the person of amana. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Person of belief, a person of trust. What kind of trust? A contract between yourself and Allah Jalla wa Ala. So automatically you see the emotional context that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, you, the person who believes, the person who has a trust with the Lord of everything that exists. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam. Fasting has been prescribed for you. Not you must fast. Kutiba here is in the passive voice in the Arabic language, meaning it's something easy. Allah doesn't want hardship on you. He wants ease on you. So this has been prescribed for you. Like it was prescribed for those before you. So you're not the only people who have done this. Other spiritual traditions have done this. You're not alone. It works. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. In order for you to come close to Allah, to be aware of Him, to have God consciousness. In these verses, the ulama say that we have to fast. But look at the language Allah Jalla wa Ala chose to engage with you. To engage with you. To really penetrate the inner dimensions of the human being. Because sometimes we come to the Quran in a very rabbinical way. Where am I going to find my law? Is this halal? Is this haram? This is our approach. But this was never the approach of the Sahaba. It was never the approach of the Sahaba. Obviously they went to the Quran for the legalisms, for the ahkam, of course. But primarily they went to the Quran to shape the entire worldview, to make them understand things concerning man, life and the entire universe, to enable them, just after 80 years of the death of the Prophet ﷺ, to go to Multan, and to Pakistan, and to Spain. Just after 80 years of the death of the Prophet ﷺ, because they were inspired by the Quranic values. This is why a French artistic critic, do you know what he said? He said, his name was Jean-Jacques Lévesque. He said, you know, the Muslims, when they took over the world, they didn't want to drink people's blood. Muslims are peaceful people. But they were inspired. They wanted to see what was beyond the horizon. And they wanted to share this beauty of Islam to everybody else. Hence, Allah says in the Quran, and we shall show them signs in the horizons and within themselves until they know this is the haqq, this is the truth. Now the reason I'm mentioning this is because when we study the Quran from this perspective, not only listen to it and be moved, but do tadabbur, to do this reflection. As Allah says in the Quran, don't you reflect upon the Quran or are your hearts locked up? So when we do this tadabbur, we see that the question today, does God exist, is actually answered in the Quran itself. Because sometimes we think we have to go to this type of philosophy and that type of philosophy and speak to this scientist and that scientist, and we have to have a PhD, and we have to have a degree, and we have to do this and we have to do that. No, the answer is in the Quran itself. And when you have a relationship with the Quran from this perspective, every time you read the Quran will be giving you answers or will be pointing in this direction. Because this is the nature of the Quran. You know the ulama, they say that the Quran is a very intrusive text. It was to intrude in the inner dimensions of human beings, of man. And how does the Quran achieve this? The Quran achieves this in a very positive way. by asking the right questions. أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Have you not seen the created thing like the camel and how it was formed and created? Allah is not giving you an answer here, He's giving you a question. Why? So it becomes a springboard, a launching pad for you to continue intellectually using your aql to understand that not only Allah exists, but He deserves to be worshipped. Because all of these verses in the Quran concerning rububiyyah, concerning the creative capacity of Allah Jalla wa Ala, are there not only to be reflected upon from a crude perspective, but they're there to make you realize, yes, He exists, He is one, and He must be worshipped. For instance, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves, do they not see? Again, Allah Jalla wa Ala making you think about the inner dimensions of man. أَوَلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Do they not reflect within themselves? Make you think about the inner physiology of the human being and the psychology of the human being. Both dimensions. So the Quran, as you can see from this perspective, is making you think and reflect and ponder. وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus do we explain our signs and evidences in detail for those who reflect. يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. But we've become so scared of thinking. We have become so scared of thinking as an ummah. And I think one of our reasons for decline is because we have stopped thinking. We don't have the intellectual bravery anymore. We just close our eyes. But this is not the case, my beloved brothers and sisters. The Quran is a book for humanity. Not for robots, not for zombies. For humanity. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. As Allah says in the Quran, do you not use your intellect? So this word يَتَفَكَّرُونَ comes from the root word فَكَرَى, which, when you look into the classical Arabic dictionaries, what words do you have? Well, the meaning is this. The meaning is the thing that you're reflecting upon, you must inquire deeply about implications. What does it mean that there's a beginning to the universe? What does it mean to have a consciousness? How did conscious reality come from non-conscious matter? Is that possible? Making you think about the implications of reality. Not just saying, oh, that's so nice, subhanallah. But no, to actually scratch the surface and go a little bit deeper and ask the question, why? And not only ask the question, why? But ask the question, how? This is why many thinkers have described the Quran as a very powerful, rational document. Associate Professor Rosalind Gwynn. Associate Professor Rosalind Gwynn, she wrote the book, Logic, Legal Reasoning, and I believe Arguments in the Quran, published by Routledge Academic Press. And she mentions in the first chapter, in the conclusion, that the Quran, as a book, really uses positive arguments in a simple way, but that penetrate the heart and mind of the human being. And this is how we should see the Quran. The Quran is a book of guidance, not a book of sounds. So I really want you to understand this, because when we go to the Quran, we'll be able to answer this question. And you're thinking, how? Before we do this, I just want to add a little point about God's existence. I don't think we even need to prove God's existence. We need to be brave here. Because do you have to prove that your mother is your mother? Do you have to prove your mother is your mother? It's a self-evident truth. Do you have to prove that the world is round? Do you have to prove that I'm a man or I have a beard? It's self-evident. For us as Muslims, we should believe the existence of God is self-evident. And this is so true because Allah Jalla wa Ala, what does He say? That this deen is based on fitrah. What does fitrah mean? Coming from the word fatara, which you have other words like fatrun and fatarahu, that Allah Jalla wa Ala, as if He created something within us to already know that He is a reality. And this is why when you go to the works of anthropologists like Petrovich, Bartlett, Hood and others, there is a conclusion in social psychology and in anthropology that if you take children, the people of Fitra, even if they come from atheist backgrounds, and you put them on a desert island, they're going to believe in one God. You saw this with Russia and China, when they were communist entities. They don't believe in a God. It's a very irreligious society. But they still have this kind of worship instinct, which is called the sanctification instinct. Because they have big statues of Lenin and Stalin, and almost like they're worshipping them or revering them. So that instinct is coming out. So from this perspective, we don't have to prove anything. This is why Musa alayhi salam, when he spoke to Fir'aun, what did he say? Is there any doubt in the Lord of everything that exists? Is there any doubt? Allah Jalla wa Ala, God is not a concept, He is a precept. He's not a concept, He's a precept. He is already necessary for you to even articulate language and thought and ideas. So the onus of proof is on you if you don't believe Him. We don't have nothing to prove. But in saying that, the Quran does give us proof as well. So the Quran in chapter 52, verse 35 to 36. So the Quran, chapter 52, verses 35 to 36. What does Allah Jalla wa Ala say? He talks about specifically about the creation of the human being. And He says, were you created from nothing? Did you create yourselves? Or did you create the heavens and the earth? بَلْ لَا يُقِنُونَ. Indeed, rather, they have no faith, they have no conviction. Now the ulama, when they studied these verses, they gave us 4 possibilities of explanations to find out about how something began. I repeat, the ulama from these verses derive certain logical explanations to argue or to find out how something began. Because it talks about how the human being was created. Because we came into being, we didn't always exist. You haven't existed for eternity. And this includes anything that begins to exist, which includes the entire universe. So what are these logical explanations that Allah Jalla wa Ala is giving us? Number 1, if something began, it either came from nothing. Number 2, if something began, it created itself. Number 3, if something began, it was created by something else created. Number 4, if something began, it was created by something uncreated. Let me repeat. The logical possibilities Allah Jalla wa Ala is giving us in these verses. Number 1, if something began to exist, it either came from nothing, it created itself, it was created by something else created, or created by something uncreated. So when we take these 4 logical possibilities derived from the Quran, how can we now argue that the universe has a creator? The only thing we have to do is, before we discuss these 4 logical possibilities, is to find out if this universe that exists here, if it began. Because if the universe never began, it's always been here, then you don't need a God. If something didn't begin and it's not going to end, it doesn't require explanation. It's always been here. So these 4 logical possibilities don't apply. So all we have to show is that the universe began. And if it began, then we could discuss the 4 logical possibilities. Is everyone with me so far? Alhamdulillah. So let's now find good reasons to believe that the whole universe began. And there are so many good reasons. Reason number 1. Big Bang cosmology. You learn this at school, you learn this at A-levels and at university. Scientists now are saying that the universe had a beginning. Some scientists, for example, like Alexander Vilenkin, who is a leading theoretical physicist, say that we can't run away from a cosmic beginning. The universe began. Now they try and speculate and say, well, there must have been something before that beginning, like this eternal quantum vacuum, but that's a different discussion. The point here is they say this universe, space and time, began a finite time ago in the past. So that's the first type of evidence, because the cosmologists are arguing that because in history we had the scientist Hubble, he would see through his telescope, he would see these distant stars called Cepheid variables, these luminous stars, and they were shifting away. Combined with background radiation, they said, well, this means that the universe is expanding. So if we rewind the clock, there must have been a beginning to the universe. So if something is expanding, like a balloon, for example, you rewind it, or you take the air out, it comes back to its beginning point. So they're arguing it's more likely the universe had a beginning. It hasn't always been there. That's the first piece of evidence to show that the universe had a beginning. The second piece of evidence. Well, if the universe never had a beginning, brothers and sisters, that would mean the universe is eternal. If the universe never began, it's always been here. If it's always been here, it's been here for an infinite amount of time. It's been here for eternality. It is eternal. But the question is, can we have an eternal universe? Al-Ghazali, the 11th century philosopher and theologian, in his Tahafut al-Falasifa, in his refutation of the philosophers, in his famous book, he argues that the universe must have began. And he uses a very simple argument. He says, look at the sky. Just look at the sky. Look at, for example, the moon and the sun. Or look at Saturn and Mars. Look at any distant celestial object, like two different planets. If the universe was always here, that means there have been an infinite number of orbits around the sun. He said if the universe has always been here, it means there have been an infinite number of orbits around the sun. But then he argues and says, okay, let's look at Saturn. Okay, if the universe has always been here, therefore Saturn must have gone around the sun an infinite number of times. But then he says, well, let's look at Mars. If the universe has always been here, therefore Mars must have gone around the sun an infinite number of times. But we know it takes, for example, around, and this, I don't know the numbers, but just for argument's sake, it takes 11 orbits of Mars for one orbit of Saturn. So how could they be here for an infinite number of time? It's a contradiction. For Saturn to go around the Earth, Mars has to, so for Saturn to go around the Sun, Mars goes around the Sun once. So for Saturn to go around the Sun, for example, Mars goes around the Sun 11 times. I don't know the numbers, but there is a ratio. But if the universe has been here for an infinite number of times, therefore these orbits must be already infinite. But you could actually have a ratio between the infinite. Now if anyone knows mathematics, if you take away from an infinite, what do you get? You get an infinite. If you add to infinity, what do you get? Infinity. But here we have discrete numbers. So Al-Ghazali was saying, therefore the universe couldn't have been eternal. It couldn't have always existed. And there are many other mathematical, conceptual reasons why the universe can't be eternal. I don't want to bore you with it. I just want to give you ideas so you can investigate for yourself. So just by looking at these two ideas, cosmology and the orbits and the celestial orbits, and even in mathematics, you know you can't have an infinite past. You can't have a universe that has always been here. It must have began. So if the universe began, we go back to the Quran now. Because the Quran gives us 4 logical explanations to try and explain how things begin to exist. Because originally these verses were about the human being. Did the human being come from nothing? Did the human being create itself? Did the human being, was it created by something else created? Or was the human being created by something uncreated? So let's now do this together concerning the universe. So now the universe began. Let's go to the first option. Who remembers the first option? Could it come from nothing? So could the universe come from nothing? Who could answer this question for me? I'm telling you, you don't need a lecture. You already know the answers. Wallahi. You're just a bit shy. Why can't anything come from nothing? I'm not going to continue until you give me an answer.
You can't have something from nothing.
You can't have something from nothing. That's so true. It's so intuitive. It's fitri. It's such a blatant reality. Let me do this mathematically for you. 0 means nothing. No thing. So what is 0 plus 0 plus 0?
Nothing.
It's 0. You're never going to get 3, are you? So no matter what you do with nothing, you're always going to end up with?
Nothing.
That was easy, wasn't it?
No.
Now, we have though a professor called Professor Lawrence Krauss. He wrote a book, A Universe from Nothing. And he tries to argue, using physics, that the universe came from nothing. But you have to read his book. His nothing is not nothing. It's something. I know, it's really funny, isn't it? This is what these atheist scientists do. They change the meaning of a word because they can't answer the original question. So his nothing, he says, is unstable. It is physical. And it's a bizarre way of using the word nothing to make us confused, thinking that something can come from nothing, so we don't have to believe in God. But in reality, we know something can't come from nothing, but his nothing actually means something. And he's doing it to confuse everybody. Let me give you an example. It's like me saying, you know, my wife, she made a great dinner last night, and it was nothing. Or you know, my wife, she met somebody outside of this masjid. She met nobody outside the masjid, and they gave her directions to this hall. Or, nothing tastes great with a bit of whipped cream. That's what he's doing. He's changed the definition of nothing into something, but kept the word nothing to confuse us, to think that something comes from nothing. But in reality, nothing comes from nothing. Kuch nahi. Yeah, is that what you say? Much nahi to kuch nahi. It's a famous saying in Pakistan. Much nahi means if you don't have a moustache, you don't have anything. Yeah? So the point is, we know that from nothing, nothing comes. It's an impossibility. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah, he views this verse slightly differently. He says, maybe the universe came from something, and it has to come from something like Allah Jalla wa Ala, ultimately. But he said it's also via nothing. It's like a state change, because Ibn Taymiyyah, in his Minhaj as-Sunnah, what does he say? He says, everything apart from Allah is makhluq, is created. Everything apart from Allah is muhdath. It came into existence once it was non-existing. It was originated. So the point here being is, could originated things come into existence via nothing? No, it's an impossibility. It's like a state change from nothing to something. You need something for that to happen. Take, for example, an ice cube in your hand. It turns from a solid to a liquid because of the heat, the temperature in my hand. So it changes state via something. So the point here is that the universe couldn't come from nothing, and it couldn't come via nothing. It must have come from something or come via something. Make sense? Hamza, so what's the next option? Who remembers that the Quran is giving us? That the universe created it itself. This is the most funniest one. Now, for something to create itself, it means it was in existence and not in existence at the same time. Isn't it? For example, I say I created myself. Well, how can that be? Because for me to be created, it means I once wasn't there. But in order for me to create myself, it means I was there before I was there. Confusion? Of course. Let me make it a little bit simpler for you. Can your mother give birth to herself? Exactly. It's a logical impossibility. The universe couldn't create itself. And that's very simple. So what was the next option? That the universe created by something else? Created. Exactly. So we know the universe couldn't come from or via nothing. We know the universe couldn't create itself. And now we're addressing the option that the Quran is giving us, that the universe could have been created by something else created. Ultimately, this is not an explanation. Why? Because you cannot, and all the ulama agree with this. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Ghazali, people from this side of the theological spectrum and this side of the theological spectrum. It's called an infinite regress of causes. Not events, causes. Because how can one cause take its power from a previous cause, but that cause take its causal power from a previous cause, and that cause take its causal power from another cause? If that goes on forever, are we going to have the cause in the first place? Is it going to have an effect? Just like Ibn Taymiyyah said and Al-Ghazali said, you're not going to have any existence. And let me make this easier for you to understand. Take for example, I'm a sniper, and I want to shoot a bird. Before I shoot the bird, I have to ask permission from the person behind me. Now, if he has to ask permission as well, and that goes on forever, am I ever going to shoot the bird? No. Exactly. Take, for instance, a row of dominoes. The dominoes have gone far beyond the horizon. But all the dominoes you see have fallen, and the one in front of you has fallen. What does it mean about the domino chain? It has a beginning. Does it go on forever? No. Same with causes. You can't have an infinite regress of creators or causes. Because if you say, for instance, this universe, universe 1, was as a result of universe 2, and that universe was as a result of universe 3, and universe 3 was as a result of universe 4, and universe 4 was as a result of universe 5, and universe 5 was as a result of universe 6, and universe 6 was as a result of universe 7, if that goes on forever, would we ever have this universe in the first place? No. You just have a state of non-existence, nothing. This is why we end up with the final option, which is what? That the universe was created by something uncreated. And interestingly, in Professor Anthony Froux's book, There Is a God, he was a very famous atheist for 60 years or something. Then he became someone who believed in a God. He wrote the book, There Is a God. In the appendix, there is a philosopher, his name is Abraham Varghese. And he says, look, this is so part of our nature. No one disagrees with something being eternal. Even atheists agree something must be eternal. It's either the universe is eternal, or what created the universe is eternal. Make your mind up. God or the universe? We're saying God must be eternal because the universe began. And what begins can't be eternal. So the best explanation is that this universe was created by something uncreated. Now this doesn't mean Allah exists. It doesn't even mean God exists. Because some atheists even believe that there is something uncreated that created the universe. Sometimes they call it the quantum vacuum, or the pre-eternal quantum vacuum, or this kind of fuzzy quantum foam, or whatever kind of names they come up with. But it's all theoretical, with not much empirical justification. But all we know is that there is an uncreated creator. But if we continue to use the Quranic approach, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, do you not use your intellect, as Allah Jalla wa Ala says in the Quran? If we continue with this approach, we can conclude that this uncreated creator must be Allah. And listen very carefully. Now, if there is an uncreated creator, it means number one, he's eternal. Because if you're an uncreated thing, you've always been around. If you never began, you've always been there. You're everlasting. So it means this uncreated creator is everlasting and eternal. Number two, this creator must be powerful. Why must it be powerful? One atom in this universe. There are billions of atoms in this universe. Just one atom, take it, hypothetically. Split it in half, what happens? It's like a nuclear explosion. It's a release of an immense amount of energy. So the one who created one atom and all these billions of atoms with this potential energy must be powerful. Number two, this uncreated creator must be intelligent or knowing, perpetually intelligent. Why? If I drop this piece of paper, where does it go? the floor. Why? Because the law of gravity. These are established natural laws. And if there is natural laws being created in the universe, there must be a law giver. And if someone who creates a law must be intelligent or knowing. So what we've done so far, he must be everlasting and eternal, he must be powerful, he must be knowing. The fourth point, if he's the uncreated creator, he created the universe, he must be outside of the universe. Or better terminology is the Quranic terminology, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Allah Jalla wa Ala, that's what he says about himself. There is nothing like unto Allah. This is what Ibn Taymiyyah said and many other ulama, that when you create, for example, this lectern, this is called a lectern. When you create a lectern, do I become the lectern? Do I become the lectern? If I help build this masjid, this mosque, this masjid, do I become the mosque? No. I am distinct and destroying to that thing which I make. Similarly, Allah Jalla wa Ala, when He created the whole universe, He is distinct and destroying from the universe. In big terms, they call this transcendence. Subhanallah. Glory be to Allah. Transcendent is Allah. And this is affirmed in the Quran. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Number 5. He must have a will. A will. In Islamic thought, this is called irada. Allah mentions this all the time in the Quran, that He has a will. Allah does what He wills. So, how do we know this uncreated creator has a will? The easiest way is this. He's eternal. He's knowing, he must have a will. Because something that is going to be eternal and knowing must be able to choose, or must be able to have a will and does things as a result of his own nature. Another way of looking at it is in the following way. If this uncreated creator is eternal, everlasting as we've mentioned, and he created the universe that began at a point in time, it means the creator chose the universe to come into existence. Think about this. If this creator is eternal, and the universe is not eternal, it started at a certain point, it means this creator chose the universe to come into existence. Because if he never chose the universe to come into existence, the universe would have to be eternal as well. It have to exist in coexistence with the creator. But since the creator is eternal and the universe is finite, it began, it's makhluq, it's muhdath, it means the creator chose the universe to come into existence. So look what we've done. We've just done an intellectual tafsir of Surah Ikhlas. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Say, God, Allah is uniquely one, transcendent, unique. He's self-subsisting, independent. He begets none, nor was He begotten. There is nothing like unto Him. So we mentioned, He's powerful. The Quran used the word here, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say, Allah is Ahad. So the term Allah, Al-Ilah, implies a powerful deity. Knowing. The term Allah implies the deity that knows. Transcendent, distinct from the universe. The last verse of Surah Ikhlas, there is nothing like unto Him. So when we start understanding this, we see that using our aql, as Allah says in the Quran, we come to the conclusion that not only is there an uncreated creator, but this creator is Allah Jalla wa Ala. So let me just repeat what we've done. We went to chapter 52 of the Quran. We looked at verses 35 to 36. Just like even contemporary scholars like Dr. Jafar Idris, he wrote about this. He called it the Quranic argument for God's existence. And basically, you take these verses that talk about the human being, that did the human being come from nothing? Did the human being create itself? Did the human being, was it created by something else created? Or was the human being created by something uncreated? We can apply this to anything that begins to exist as well. So we went to the universe. We asked the question, did the universe begin to exist? Of course it began to exist. We have cosmological arguments concerning the cosmologists affirming that the universe began. We have the arguments from our classical theologians saying that the universe cannot be eternal just by looking at the orbits of the universe, for example. And we have other mathematical options concerning the infinite itself. and different types of infinite, but I didn't want to confuse everybody today. The point is the universe began. If it began, we could use the same type of logic. Did it come from nothing or via nothing? Did it create itself? Was it created by something else created? Or was it created by something uncreated? And you answered the question for me. It couldn't be nothing. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is never going to be 3. It's going to be 0. From nothing, nothing comes. If something emerges via nothing, then it didn't really emerge in the first place. Because state changes have to happen via something. It couldn't create itself. Could something exist and not exist at the same time? Could your mother give birth to herself? It couldn't be created by something else created. Because you can't have an infinite regress of causes. For example, could Universe 1 be as a result of Universe 2? If Universe 2 was as a result of Universe 3? If Universe 3 was as a result of Universe 4? If that goes on forever, are we ever going to have this universe, Universe 1? No. So therefore the best explanation is an uncreated creator. And we continue to use our mind, and then we understand that this uncreated creator must be powerful, transcendent, must be knowing, eternal, everlasting, must have a will, which is in line with the Quran, what the Quran says about the basic definition of Allah Jalla wa Ala. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. So from this perspective, my beloved brothers and sisters, very short argument. It's available online and offline. It's available in leaflet. It's available in books. The brothers know this. Learn it. It's time now that you don't just come to the masjid and you listen to some lectures and you think, wow, my iman is high. This man, he came. He's supposed to be Greek, but he looks Pakistani. And he taught us something, he used some big words. I don't know what he was talking about, but it sounded good. So I feel great for a few hours. When you wake up for Fajr, you feel the same. Don't treat this lecture as like spiritual diabetes. Like our iman is low and we have to inject it with a talk. Spiritual insulin. Do not treat this like that. Elevate yourselves. You have to take anything I've said and make it like an avalanche. There was a little pebble that was dropped on this snowy mountain and it rolled and rolled and became this huge ball and this whole avalanche happened. We need a dawah avalanche, people. There's an unprecedented intellectual attack against the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Just go on Google, Sheikh Google, and you find that out. Type in Islam. There's lots of people with degrees from the Alum, the Alum of Sheikh Google. Honestly, the Islamic University of YouTube, the Islamic University of Google, the Islamic University of Twitter. There's lots of permissions given by ulama. Ijazah. I have an ijazah from Sheikh Twitter. Jazakallahu khairan, barakallahu feek, mashallah. But I'm trying to raise a serious point, because every single one of you, wallahi, have the ability and capacity to articulate things like this. Let me tell you why. Don't allow shaitan to use your own voice against you. Okay? How many of you have basically bought a car or a house based on a complex financial contract? Many of you, yeah? Some, don't lie, yeah? You've got nice houses in your cars, right? Have you ever dealt with a contract before? No? Of course. You're Pakistanis, man. You do it all the time. So the point I'm trying to raise is this. We either bought a house, or we bought a car, or we've done some kind of financing, we've done something. Look at all the research we had to do for that contract. We learned terms that Chachaji never knew before. He probably doesn't know any English, but he knows, for example, non-refundable, yeah? Do you see my point? 5.9 APR, yeah? The point is, we know these terms, and we learn about the finance, and we learn about the years we have to pay, and the contract, and what the risk is involved, and we learn these new concepts, complex concepts about the dunya. But when it comes to the deen, it's like leave it to Mufti or Imam Saab. No. If you leave the deen just to Mufti and Imam Saab, I'm telling you, we're not going to have a deen left. This deen is based based on people of substance. Don't get me wrong, Imam Sahib and Mufti are people of substance as well. But they're leaders, and leaders could only lead people. If there's no people, they're not leading anybody. So you have to be those people that they could say, so-and-so, Fatima, Abdullah, Aisha, Zakaria, go, do something. Qum fa'andir, arise and warn. And you can learn this. I know people in this room that have learned this. They've come to our courses. I see them, I've seen them. They knew maybe nothing about the topic, and now they know something about the topic. The point is, for me to give you a full-blown analysis on this topic, we could spend 4 hours, we could spend 8 hours, we could spend 8 weeks, but it's irrelevant. If you don't have the motivation, you're finished. There's no point. There is no point. If you just absorb this like a memory and then you don't use it, then you're no different from an iPad. My iPad is Hafid. Wallahi, my iPad is Hafid. He's got the whole Quran. My iPad's got the whole Quran. He has Bukhari there. He has all the ahadith. But is my iPad a scholar though? Is he giving da'wah though? That's why Imam Malik said that true knowledge is not learning riwayat. It's not learning the different narrations and just memorizing Quran. Don't get, there's a virtue in this. But that's not true knowledge. True knowledge is the nur that Allah gives you in your heart, that you've taken this wahi and you've done something with it. You know, one of the kabair, one of the major sins in Islam is to have knowledge and not to implement it, or not to teach it, or not to use it. Do you know this? You know, we have this knowledge craze, all these new courses, this institute, that institute, go to this university, go to this Dar Alum. I've had many opportunities to do this. Doesn't mean you go Saudi, I'll pay for you. No, I'm scared if I get all this knowledge and I don't do nothing with it, I'm in trouble. We're in trouble, people. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't do that, you have to, but you have to have the vision that it's what? إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Except those who believe and do good deeds. Belief, ideas, learning, deeds come hand in hand in Islam. And it's very important for now for you to arise and mourn. It defines who you are. Are you dead Muslim walking, or are you alive? يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِرُسُولِهِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. Oh, you who believe, respond to Allah and His Messenger, to the call, to that which gives you life. يُحْيِيكُمْ. The ulama said, if you don't respond to this call, Imam Bukhari said this call is the call to all good, which we know means the whole of Islam. If you don't respond to this call, you're a dead person. Dead Muslim walking. I was born, I got older, I did a medical engineering degree that I didn't want to do, but my parents forced me. I got married, usually to someone that my parents forced me. You had kids, you bought a house, regrettably. You went Hajj, then you died. Excellent. That's the modern narrative of a so-called practicing Muslim. They see the narrative of our past. They were born, they studied the deen, they explored the world, they took over the world, they learned the sciences, they met new people, they spread the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala, they inspired people, they motivated Western civilization. Different story. What's your legacy? I know what your legacy is going to be tonight. Curry and chapatis. But wallahi, we need to move on from this, my beloved brothers and sisters. And the biggest thing is nothing to do with knowledge. Wallahi, it's nothing to do with knowledge in my humble opinion. You know what, in the Cypriot Greek dialect, you right? In the Cypriot Greek dialect, there's this word called skulugui. Now you know what skulugui means? It's a colloquial for a worm. And you know sometimes like Zakaria, he's a bit tired now, and God bless him, my son. Zakaria, when he comes to my mum's house, because my mum's Greek Cypriot, my dad's from Greece, she mentions skulugui. He's got a skulugui, meaning he can't sit down. He eats, he's not sitting down. He plays, he's climbing, he's running, he's doing everything, for example. So it's a word called skulugui. You have this thing that you just can't sit. We all need to have a skulugui for the dawah. We need to have this little worm that's always agitating us, because if we sit at home doing nothing, we should actually feel guilty. We should train ourselves so much that if we're not doing something for the deen of Allah Jalla wa Ala, then we should be feeling guilty. Don't get me wrong, the body has rights over you. Playing with your wife, for example, is not a waste of time, according to the hadith. So we know there are things that are not waste of times. But what about the rest of our lives? You know, the visions that we have for our business, and you know, how many houses do we really need, people? How many cars do we really need? I mean, subhanAllah, if you were to die and I were to feed all that money and houses into your mouth, you would never be resurrected anyway. Think about it. Think about it. So respond to this call positively, my beloved brothers and sisters. And this is why the Quran even talks about how we will attain felicity in this success. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And let there rise amongst you a group of band of people from within the ummah that will call to the good. Ibn Kathir in his tafsir, he said this good is the whole of Islam, comprehensively. They command the right, they forbid the wrong. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And they are the ones who attain success. Al-Qurtubi in his tafsir, he said success here means Jannah. Put your hand up if you want to go Jannah. Your right hand, where Ashabul Yameen. One brother was doing two hands like this, yeah. MashaAllah. May Allah grant you all Jannah Firdaus. But the point is, Allah Jalla wa Ala is giving us a way, which is rise, be with a group of people giving da'wah, command the good, forbid the evil, and you be the people who enter Jannah. Felicity. Take the story of the Sabbath. Who knows the story of the Sabbath in the Quran? When Allah Jalla wa Ala wanted to test the people, and these people, their livelihood was based on fishing. And Allah Jalla wa Ala told them, do not fish on the day of the Sabbath. Friday Maghrib into Saturday Maghrib. If you read the story in Ibn Kathir in the original, you will see there are three groups of people. The first group of people, they disobeyed Allah on a technicality. They put the nets out on the Thursday, and they picked up after the Sabbath. They're saying, whatever fish is there is an accident. We weren't really fishing. They disobeyed Allah. The second group of people, they obeyed Allah, but they didn't give any da'wah. They didn't command the good or forbid the evil. The third group of people, what did they do? They obeyed Allah, but they commanded the ma'aruf, they commanded the right, and they forbade the wrong. According to the strongest opinion, according to Ibn Kathir, what happened to each of the groups? The first group were destroyed. The first group were destroyed. The second group, Allah Jalla wa Ala kept silent on them. The third group, Allah praised them. So Allah praises you when you not only obey Him, but you give the da'wah. Keep silent on you if you just obey. So let me ask you this question. Think about this. Allah is the deity that owns praise and is deserved of praise, the only one deserved of praise. But Allah praises you if you obey Him and command the good and forbid the evil. Think about that. We're always looking for the praise of our uncle, our elders, our scholars, our teachers, our wives, our children, the media. You know, how many letters do we have at the end of our name? What committee do we belong to? What tribe do we belong to? All of this rubbish. Frankly, it's rubbish. You know, our nation has become more greater than what Allah Jalla wa Ala thinks of us. And we need to wake up on this. And we always chase this kind of praise. But Allah Azza wa Jalla, the Lord of everything that exists, is praising you if you get involved in the da'wah, if you command the good and forbid the evil. And the easiest way to start giving da'wah, do you know what the easiest way is? It's just to start giving da'wah. I'm telling you, most of the most difficult things we think are the most easiest. Just do it. You do a mistake. Mabruk. Congratulations. The one who's never done mistakes in the da'wah before has never done da'wah before. Even if his name is Zakir Naik. May Allah preserve him. The point I'm trying to say is everyone does mistakes. Oh my God, I'm full of mistakes. What, you're not going to do da'wah just because you've done a mistake? What kind of twisted person thinks like this? The human being forgets, he does wrong. But the point is, don't fall for the satanic trap that you don't act just because you think you can't. And by the way, you don't need the permission of no scholar. Because the Prophet ﷺ already gave you permission. But there's a condition. The thing you say, you must know. Khalas. The thing you say, you must know. If you don't know, say you don't know, then what does the Quran say? Ask those who know. So that was easy, people. So I thought I'd just mention this just to make you realize that it's not just about coming to these. I've given hundreds, if not thousands, of these type of lectures at different levels. And now I just end the same all the time. If you don't use it, then you've abused my time. Not that I care, because the reward is from Allah Jalla wa'ala, but just to make you feel guilty. And you've abused your own time, and you've committed injustice upon yourself. I'm telling you, if you were in Siberia and there was a way to get there, I'll come and we'll give a lecture. And I know other brothers are like that as well. But the point is, we need 1,000 or 1 million Zakir Naiks. We need 2 million Abdurrahim Greens. We need 3 million Adnan Rashids. We need lots of these people. Because there's 6 billion people on this planet. You think one man is going to do the job? We need a movement going. A positive movement. A compassionate Muslim entity that will articulate a positive case to the wider society. Because we know it's good for us. We get reward and barakah from Allah Jalla wa'ala. It prevents us from calamity. And also it facilitates our Jannah. And also it facilitates the Jannah of other people. And it shows that we're the true humanists. We don't want people's pain in the dunya, but we don't want it in the akhirah either. Just like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As the Quran says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you're going to almost kill yourself with anxiety and frustration. They're not listening to you. He had empathy. He was worried. He was almost going to kill himself from the anxiety. Look what his heart was for his qawm, for his people. Where's our heart for our people? What do we say? Dirty kuffs. Isn't it? We have the dirty kuffs approach. Forget that. We even say that amongst each other, especially in Birmingham, I heard, man. Crazy. The fitna here is madness. Wallahi, unite people. Unite. Ibn Taymiyyah said, after La ilaha illallah, unite with anybody to preserve the deen of Allah Jalla wa'ala. Even in fiqh. In fiqh, yeah. And you could study this in your own usul. That unity is more important than your opinion. I don't pray like a Hanafi, right? I'm not a Hanafi, I'm like a Shafi. But when I go to a Hanafi masjid, I'm going to pray like a Hanafi. So what? I didn't do the Raf al-Yadayn. Big deal. Oh, is it a big deal? Wallahi, we have masjids in Pakistan killing each other, the Ahnaf and the Ahl Hadith, at each other's necks because of the Raf al-Yadayn. Uqsum billah, if you don't do the Raf al-Yadayn, your prayer is still valid. Learn about your own salah, the pillar of your prayer. Don't get me wrong, I think it's sunnah. But look at me the way I'm saying this. These fiqh differences are irrelevant. We have to, in light of the bigger priorities. And yet we'll argue each other on Geo, on what God knows what other channels. I've been to Pakistan, that's why I know about this, by the way. I was doing a tour there. I was in Lahore. I was in Islamabad, Rawalpindi, Peshawar. Peshawar is an exciting place to win. Yeah? I wasn't there this year, I was there the year before. So the point is that when you know these things, we need to elevate each other from this perspective. I gave a dawah course in a masjid in Halifax, up north. And it's a Ahl Hadith masjid. And I told them this. And they started working with other Muslims now. And that's how we should be, brothers. Wallahi, we're going to have differences. You know what? These arguments are even beyond you. It's an arrogance to get into these arguments. If you don't know Arabic, you're not a mujtahid, you don't know the Islamic sciences, you can't await evidences, you don't know how to reconcile between similar ahadith or verses, similar in weight, but yet they may be contradicting each other in meaning. You know, what's the Islamic scientific process to go about this? Do you have that knowledge? No, we don't. So just love your brothers and sisters. Except, don't get me wrong, we're not like everyone comes into our family. We're not going to accept people doing shirk now, yeah? Yeah, Hadi Allah, come. Yeah, we're not saying the Hindus are now Muslims. No, the point is we know the framework. The 6 pillars of Iman. Affirming Tawheed, not attributing things to creation that we should attribute to Allah Jalla wa Ala. These are the basic things. When it comes to fiqh and things like this, just follow someone you trust, but unite on the most important things like the da'wah. You know, we always talk about the sunnah. There's one sunnah that is uncompromising, and that is da'wah. Sometimes, if you read the Shafis, they would say, for example, that, and I could be corrected, the ring that the Prophet wore was on his left small finger, but the stone was facing inside. Other ulama say it was facing upward. Other ulama say, no, actually the ring was on the right hand. Other ulama say that the sunnah before Asr was in 2s. Others say it's 4s. Ikhwan, this is the deen. There's not one, it's not my way or the highway. It doesn't work that way in Islam. Even the Sahaba had differences. Check even the concept of divorce in Islam. The Sahaba differed. So you think you're going to solve the problem? You think you have the authority? Or who? You have new wahi now, there's new revelation come on you, giving you the authority to think that you can solve these differences? So but this is beyond you. Let me tell you what's in your context though. Love the brothers. Unite with them, give the da'wah. The Prophet ﷺ said, you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. Love. Do you know what that means? Love. SubhanAllah, we look and act like as if we haven't heard that word before. Love. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you love somebody, tell them. Tell them. Brother shy there, mashallah. Let me start you off. I love you guys. So, you know, the reason I'm mentioning this, brothers, because this is probably the most important thing than the talk. Do you know that? Because it's the right emotional, spiritual framework for us to have before we can start doing all these other things. Because if we're not united, relatively united, if we're not together, especially for the da'wah. You know, I heard there's like different da'wah stores in Birmingham, and they talk against each other. Let me tell you something, I'm from Hackney, yeah? Much worse than Birmingham. I was brought up in the 80s. And may Allah not use my words against you, but if I'm walking the street and I see this, those tables won't be there. I will be physical on those brothers. I don't care. I'm not going to beat them up. I will take the tables. I will join them together or join their heads together. Then what's wrong with you, man? This is Islam and you're talking against each other? What's wrong with your hearts? Wallahi, you know my dad, right? He's not a Muslim. But brothers have said to me, my dad should give khutbah. Do you know why? Because my dad told me this stuff before I was Muslim. But we have our people who are not even adopting these values of rahmah and these values of unity. You know, interesting, there's one scholar, he gave the Quran to his father. And his father's an intellectual. He read the book. And he asked his father, what do you think about the Quran? And he said, if there's anything I could say about the Quran, it's fundamentalist focus on unity. And we should be like that in our communities, especially in Birmingham. And I don't think this is like very idealistic, because whatever I say, probably things will get better. But let me give you some other advice. If from now on you come to your brother as a blank canvas, and you listen with the intent to understand, and you blame yourself, I think things will be much better. So let me just repeat. If you come to your brother with a blank canvas, meaning the history has no meaning. What he said, what they said, what Fulan said, irrelevant. I'm coming as a blank canvas, not using any of my experience and perceptions and thoughts and imposing it on the brother. Come as a blank canvas. This is the sunnah, by the way. The Prophet ﷺ used to say to his Sahaba, don't tell me about anybody else. I want to engage with them like the way they should be engaged with. That's number one. Come to them as a blank canvas, even if you have history. Number two, listen with the intention to understand. This is very hard. You know, we don't do that with our wives sometimes. You know, they'll be saying something like, and we say, but. The moment you say but, it means you've been manufacturing a response while you've been listening. And we have this in the da'wah as well. Even when we talk to atheists, for example, we think we know what they're all about. So we're just going, yeah, and we give them something, thinking it's the best. But you haven't listened to the poor guy. He's an atheist because his mum died when he was 3 years old. And he doesn't have an answer, but you're giving him arguments with his intellectualisms and you're not engaging with him because you haven't listened. Same with our brothers. Listen with the intent to understand. The third point, blame yourself all the time for everything. You know, once you get to your own ego, because most of our problems are problems of ego. And the ego is our worst enemy that Shaitan uses as a window to open to abuse the ummah. The nafs, what's the nature of the nafs? It wants to be right, it never wants to be wrong. It wants to impose, it never wants to be imposed upon. So just flip the script. Say, Akhi, I was wrong. Akhi is my fault. There's no wonder Ali radiallahu anhu said, never demand your rights, just give people other their rights. He also said in a very beautiful statement, that be like the flower that leaves its fragrance to the hand that crushes it. So imagine we're like that. It's a beginning, we could try. But yeah, apologies for speaking my mind. But you know, this is nasiha. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ad-Din al-Nasiha, the deen is sincere advice. And obviously it's to me first, and to everybody else. And I'm saying it because I see you like a mirror. When I speak to you, it's like speaking to myself. Al-mu'minu mirat al-mu'min. The Prophet ﷺ said, the believer is like a mirror of another believer. So khair, take the advice or leave it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. May He create this community as a wonderful community. It's already a wonderful community, but even better. There's khair in the ummah, as the Prophet ﷺ said, unite, forgive and overlook. Wallahi, the Quran says all the time, forgive and overlook. Create that unity, unite for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Get involved with the brothers here. They've had over 160 shahadas from the dawah stall. A 62-year-old woman recently gave shahada. She gave dawah to the second or third generation in her family. So 3 generations came to Islam as a result. This is the work. If there's anything more rewardable than dawah, do it. I don't think you can find anything else. Dawah is the business to be in, brothers. You know, there's the hadith, the Prophet said that if you call someone to a good, you get the reward of that good. So imagine calling one person to Islam, and they get married. So there's 2 people now. Their prayers, their fasting, their hajj, their dhikr, their reading Quran, it's all yours. It's all yours. They have 2 kids. Okay? The kids praying, fasting, dhikr, hajj, reading Quran is all yours. And these 2 kids get married. And then they have 2 kids each. So it's like 10 people already in like 1 generation, 2 generations. And on the day of judgment, on your mizan, you'll be seeing all these deeds, and you'll be like, I didn't pray this. I didn't know Surah Baqarah. I didn't do Hajj 5 times. I didn't do Umrah 50 times. I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't give the sadaqah. It's all yours. You called them to La ilaha illallah. Pyramid schemes don't work in business, but they work in the dawah. Okay? So get involved in this. You know, we're all in the reward business at the end of the day. We want to please Allah, and we want to be pleased via His pleasure. We want to enter Jannah. We want to come close to Him. And this is an amazing way of doing it, brothers. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you tawfiq to achieve this. Forgive me if I said anything wrong or offensive. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide you, protect you, love you, and unite you. And inshallah, don't make this the last, don't make this the ends, make this the means. Meaning, you may have been inspired, you may have thought about a few things to research further, get involved, test the ideas out, call people to Islam. Don't just make this another dosage of your spiritual insulin because you're suffering from spiritual diabetes, yeah? Take this and use it. May Allah bless you. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, that's fine.
If any brothers have any questions, inshallah.
Mike, you can...
Assalamu alaikum. If any brothers have any questions, please say a question and Hamza will endeavor to answer them, inshallah. We have at least 20-25 minutes before Maghrib, so we can spend the next 10-15 minutes for Q&A, inshallah. First question, Brother Ayaz.
Okay. Jazakallah, brother. Very inspirational and thought-provoking talk. Can you explain or refute, in a nutshell, for the layman, this theory of evolution, we evolved from apes.
Okay.
How does that fit into everything?
Okay. Now, first and foremost, evolution doesn't say we evolved from apes. Evolution says we had a common ancestor. Okay? For me, the easiest way to deal with this theory is to basically say that it might make sense in the current science that we have, but it's not true. Because the Quran, the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala, we can prove it to be a miracle. If we can prove it to be a miracle for all these reasons, it means it's from Allah. If it's from Allah, then what the scientists say today, and they say something different, who are you going to take? What Allah says, or what the scientists say? You're going to take what Allah says. This doesn't mean we don't like science, because Islam came from science. Rather, science came from Islam. For example, if you read the works of David Lindbergh, the historian of science, the first real methodological manifestation of the scientific method came from Ibn al-Haytham in his book on optics. So, even Professor Thomas Arnold in his preaching of Islam, he said, if it wasn't for Islamic Spain, you would not have the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. So we're not against science, but all we say is, we're critical thinkers. Science is not wahi. It's not the gospel truth. Science is based on something called induction. Okay? Induction. What's induction? Induction is a thinking process that you take limited observations and you conclude for the general. So that means you're never going to have 100% truth. It ranges from 0 to 99%. The whole of the scientific enterprise is based on this. So it doesn't mean we take everything. And that's the easiest way of reconciling it. Because, for example, if you use science as your yardstick for truth, then you're going to be Muslim and non-Muslim every couple of days. You're going to be shifting, your iman's going to be shifting. Because in the 1940s, they believed the universe never began, it was eternal. If we're Muslim then, and born then, what do we accept? The Quran or what the 1940s scientists say? So if we're born in 2050, maybe science will change. And that's the beauty of science. So the way I reconcile it is this way. Science gets a lot of things right. It's a blessing from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Allah talks about science and empiricism. Have you not seen the camel and how we created it? But it's limited knowledge. Allah in the Quran says that human knowledge is limited. But the Quran is not limited knowledge. So why do we think science always has to be in line with the Quran? It's not, frankly. Because of the nature of the scientific method is based on induction, which is take a limited set of data and conclude for the general, conclude for the entire set of data. For example, let me give you a very easy example. I'm a Welsh scientist. I want to find the color of sheep. I count 1,000 sheep, they're all white. So I conclude all sheep are white. But we know that's not true, there are black sheep as well. I'm the black sheep of the family. So the point is, when you study the usul of science, you see that it's not 100% true. So what? Evolution may make sense on the stuff that they found out so far, but it doesn't make it 100% true. So what does the wise man do? Take what's qati, take what's definite, which is the Quran, or something indefinite, which is science. Now it doesn't mean you reject the science, no. It means when they come at loggerheads with each other, because we believe Adam alayhi salam was in paradise, he was created by Allah Azza wa Jalla, he was sent down, so it contradicts the scientific narrative. We just basically say, science is going to catch up, or science may never know. And that's why we all have to be enlightened and not fall for the very crude, popularist scientific view on life, which is science is the only way to form conclusions about man, life, and the universe. That's what we think, isn't it? If it's science, it's right. If it's not science, it's wrong. Science can do everything. It could even pay your taxes, clean your bed, and wash your clothes. Science can get you married, yeah? It's like this kind of Hollywood drama on science. But let me just make it easy for you. The view that science is the only way to form conclusions about reality is incoherent for 3 reasons. Number 1, it's self-defeating. The statement, scientific method is the only way to form conclusions about truth, can't be proven using the scientific method. It self-defeats itself. That statement that says the scientific method is the only way to form conclusions about reality cannot be proven by the scientific method. It's like me saying there are no sentences in the English language longer than 2 words. But I've just spoken a sentence longer than 2 words, so it's self-defeating. Or it's like me saying, I do not know 1 word of the English language. Well, you obviously do because you've just spoken more than 1 word of the English language. So it's self-defeating. Number 2, science can't prove necessary truths. What's 1 plus 1? 2. And this is not based on empiricism. Why? I'll give you some proof. What is 1 fufula plus 1 fufula? It's 2 fufulas. Have you seen a fufula before? What on earth is a fufula? I made it up. So it shows there is necessary logical truths that is necessary that 1 plus 1 is going to equal 2. Third point, science can't prove moral truths. Science tells you what is, can't tell you what ought to be. It just tells you what is. You can't get morality from science. It's outside of its framework. You can't get historical truths from science or political truths. It's limited. So the point is we have to be clever and not be so scared. I get so many emails from brothers saying, oh, there's this new scientific theory. Does it mean that the Quran is wrong? And I say to them, I don't even give them the answer. I give them the usul. And this is the Taymiyyah approach. You know, wallahi, we should study Ibn Taymiyyah in a non-ideological way. Because some people think they own him. Yeah? No one owns Ibn Taymiyyah. Yeah? Trust me. If you read Minhaj al-Sunnah, his works, Irada, you know nobody owns the Shaykh. May Allah have mercy on him. And he made a prophetic statement almost in a non-theological way. He said there will come a time we have to use the rational arguments of the Quran. Ajib, it's amazing. And notice this, Ibn Taymiyyah, when he did a subject, he would read and study a subject and talk about it as if that's the only subject he knew. He was so good at it. So for example, when he reviewed the Greek philosophers, he wouldn't care about this theory, that theory. He would go straight to the roots. He had an usuli approach. That's why we should use the usuli approach. Go straight to the roots of the discussion. I don't care what the Higgs boson is, or what this particle is and that particle is. Forget that. The point is, where does it come from? Is it based on a limited method that gives you limited results? Yes. Well, khalas, I have a book that's not based on limited methods or results. It's qati, it's from the divine. Do you see? So that's how I reconcile things. I disagree that Muslims should go and think now we have to be scientists and try to disprove evolution. No, because the current data we have, that's what makes sense for them. We just don't have the rest of the data. We will progress and we may find the truths more in line with the Quran, but we'll wait and see. But the point is, if we understand it from a methodological perspective, it gives us more sakina and tranquility in our heart and mind to address these modern issues, rather than thinking, oh no, look what's happened. I'm a physicist, for example, and I'm supposed to be Muslim, but I believe in evolution, so I believe Adam had a father. If you know what I'm talking about. So the point is, that's a ridiculous way of looking at it. Go straight to the usul, straight to the roots, you'll be able to reconcile this problem very easily. And you know what? That question itself, bro, needs an hour lecture. Good question, bro.
We got time, brother, don't worry.
Any other question?
Yes, brother.
I've seen brothers doing that at the end of the debate.
Yes.
What should be the attitude of the da'i when someone comes to engage them?
Very, very good question. What's your name, brother?
Muhammad.
Where are you from?
The Gambia, West Africa.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. We need a lot of down in West Africa. Anyway, the reason I've been to Africa, wallahi, we need to revive the African Islamic spirit. I believe the reason we're declining, we don't have the African passion anymore. I am telling you, I get inspired by our African brothers like I get inspired by nobody. I've been to Africa. I was giving a khutbah, bayan, to 4,000 people in South Africa, with lots of different African brothers there. They even broke the rules of the khutbah. Some guy stood up, big, beautiful black brother, preach, brother, preach! He was so inspired. And not just this, when they love Allah, they love Allah. You must love Allah. You must love Allah. Yet they have the spirit, and they're not ashamed. They don't have a complex. They just need a little bit of coordination. And I think we need to revive that spirit, the African spirit, wallahi. And once we revive it, we'll get the cradle of civilization again. Because our civilization came from Africa anyway. The greatest aspect of the Islamic civilization was because of a lot of the efforts because of Africa. We came via Africa as well. So the point I'm trying to say is we need to revive the African spirit, brother. But aside from that, debate is not dawah. I know it's quite ironic I'm saying this, but I always say this in my dawah courses. The reason we do debates with big intellectuals is not because of dawah. The objective is intellectual jihad. That's it. It's intellectual jihad. It's intellectual qital. Yeah? Because society works with influentials. Influentials shape society. So if you show that a certain influential from an atheist movement hasn't got good ideas, or he comes across very arrogant, for example, then his followers are going to be weakened in their iman. Right? That's the strategy. It's not dawah. But wallahi, when we teach people dawah, we say, because the Musa alayhi salam approach. Musa alayhi salam went to speak to Fir'aun. What did Allah Jalla wa ala say to Musa? Speak to him softly, kindly. To Fir'aun. He was the worst human being. He believed he is Allah. The Pharaonic character is the most evil character in the Quranic discourse, but Allah tells Musa, speak to him nicely. Do qiyas now. Do an analogy. Speak to everybody nicely. So we should never engage with debate. You know, Allah mentions debate in the Quran, I think about 13 times, the form of the word. The majority of the times, Allah mentions it in a negative sense. Man is a very contentious fellow. Yeah? And only a few times Allah mentions it in a positive way, but it's with the qawlan ahsan, the good speech that attracts the heart. It's not based on ego. You know the Hanbali scholar At-Tufi. At-Tufi said that debate is good, but that debate has to be a Shafian type of debate. Imam Shafi, that he wishes the truth to be from his opponent's mouth. If you know how to debate and discuss, and wish with your heart that the truth comes through from the opponent's mouth, then you're never going to argue with him. So the basic idea is, my brother, is a very good point. Don't argue, don't be contentious, don't have useless argumentation. Akhlaq, adab, rahmah, even if they spit in your face, take it. So what? This is for the sake of Allah Jalla wa ala. Look what the Sahaba took in the early period of Islam. SubhanAllah, we have it so easy. You know, we'd rather shed blood for nationalism and for our football team or for our cricket team than for Allah Jalla wa ala. So what? He spat at you. So what? So what? Big deal. Wipe it off, smile. And he'll see and he'll be like, my God, that man has something strong in him. It's iman. It doesn't mean we're washovers. We do defend ourselves, of course. But the point is, be humble, lower the ego. And this is a big thing we could learn from the Deobandi community, you know. Wallahi, I've given talks cross-culturally. Deobandis, Hanafis, Salafis, Neo-Salafis, everybody, yeah? Everyone, I've given, they don't know where to put me, which is a good thing, yeah? Well, you know, where's this guy coming from? And that's good. And the thing is, one of the greatest communities I've met is the Deobandi community. I gave a talk many years ago in Bradford, in Masjid al-Quba. And there were like 100 of the senior students and some ulama there, because it was about one of the Channel 4 programs where they talked against the Quran. And you know, the humility was so overpowering. I just melted, I was crying. Imagine being like that with fellow human beings. It doesn't mean you don't compromise your mouth. It doesn't mean you can't say, you know, you may go to hell, or you're not compromising your belief, but it's the way you deliver that message. So if we have the lack of ego, we wish the truth to come from their mouth, we have akhlaq, adab, and rahmah, we speak nicely, how can we go wrong in the da'wah? We won't. And that's why many times we get into arguments is because we don't have yaqeen ourselves. You know when you argue with your fellow brother or with a fellow human being, you get really agitated. Oh no, but you don't get it, you're so dumb, man. That attitude. You know what you're doing? You're just expressing what's inside here. It means you lack faith, you lack certainty, you have an attitude problem. This is about your ego, it has nothing to do with your Lord. It says more about you than anything else. It's one of the best questions you can ask. Because even if we revive those principles, I would even argue we don't even need to give dawah. Because we live in such crazy times, we need personalities like this. It's like, wow, what makes him tick? Don't get me wrong, you have to make the call, yeah? If Abdurrahim heard me say this, he'll kill me. But the point I'm trying to say is you need both, the call and the behavior. You know what, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. You're going to slip up, but apologize as well. When was the last time we apologized to a non-Muslim? Or even to a Muslim? SubhanAllah, when was the last time you really sincerely apologized? That says a lot about us, doesn't it? Just be yourself. Yeah, I've done it. I've learned it the hard way with two people. We wrote a whole press release against Tom Holland. He was the historian that wrote against Islam. He did the documentary called Islam, the Untold Story. And we watched the documentary. We spent until 4 or 5 in the morning writing a whole press release dealing with every one of his arguments. We misheard some of his arguments. Namely that we said he didn't mention Mecca is in the Quran, but he did say it was in the Quran. And we said that he didn't address the Christian Chronicles. He came and he was really upset and he's been tweeting me and saying, look, you lied about me. Now, what should we say? I had brothers saying to me, no, kuffar. What are you talking about? If we've done wrong, you've done wrong. It doesn't make your argument any less. Just change it, just reword it and apologize. And that's what we've done. We're going to republish it soon. And that's what we have to do. Take 2 steps back and take 1 step forward. Show your humanity from that perspective. It's very important. Because it shows that, you know what, these guys are normal too. So that's why they fear us, because they think sometimes, we're perfect. We're never wrong. Yeah? But that's not right. Sometimes you go apologize. Sometimes say sorry. Sometimes I retract the statement. I was wrong. I was overzealous. Or, I misheard what you said. Apologies. And we have to take the lead in these kind of things because it makes us human and it makes us be able to connect with them in different ways. And as a result, Tom Holland is going to come have lunch with me. Another thing, I don't know if you saw the Times lately. They did a big report on extremists, so-called extremist speakers on campus. And it was based on a right-wing report from a student rights group, the New Conservative Group, that's headed by this guy called Rahim Qassam. And it's right-wing, they got new conservative funding, and they have an agenda. Everyone's on Twitter saying, if you're a real Muslim, you got to do this, and they were arguing, almost swearing at each other. Yeah? One sister called him an oink, and called him and said to him, I bet the doctor slapped his mother when he was born. It's a rude thing. It's funny, but it's rude. Even though he may deserve it, but it's a different story. I got him up and said, let's stop the judgments because we are victims of that approach. Stop the judgments because we are already victims of that approach. I tweeted him and said, look, there's misunderstandings on both sides, let's have lunch. I'm having lunch with him on Wednesday. Right-wing neocon guy who wrote a report that wants to attack the ulama in this country that have gone to university and gave speeches. And it just takes using these principles. Don't forget it's for Allah, not for your ego. So say, yeah, we're both wrong. Let's talk, let's meet. And it doesn't mean when I meet, I'm not going to be harsh with him. I'm going to tell him, I think you're wrong, I think you're misguided, blah, blah, blah. But at least you do it in a human way. You give them that chance. You have that, the Musa alayhi salam approach. Tikta? Okay, no more? God bless you guys. Wallahi, man, God bless you and grant you Jannah Firdaus and bring your families together in love. And do me a favor, go home, tell your wife, tell your kids that you love them. Because the Prophet said, if you love somebody, tell them. You probably haven't said it for years, months, you probably never said it. Especially the typical Kashmiri mountain type father here, and they just smack down his family. I know you love them, but the Prophet says, if you do, tell them. And when you tell them, you see a smile on the face that you've never seen before, and there'll be barakah in your life. And that's how it is. That's why Allah Jalla wa Ala said to the Prophet ﷺ, if you weren't kind and merciful to the Sahaba, they would have run away from you. What does that mean? It means Islam was conveyed through the mechanism of rahmah and mercy. Be people of mercy. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, you can find this in Bukhari, that the one who is deprived of compassion is deprived of good. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.